Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you a calculation secret that nobody really talks about, but it's very simple. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, calculation is simply the skill of seeing ahead in terms of moves. Not just yours, but also your opponent's. This allows you to kind of see what's going to happen in the near future, allowing you to make better decisions. So we use calculation in order to see if a move is good or not, essentially. So the more moves you can see ahead, the better your evaluation and understanding if a move is good or not. So let's see a basic example of a one-move calculation. So you see your move that you would like to play and your opponent's response. That's one move calculation. So for example, that would be me saying, oh, if I capture the pawn here, my opponent will use their bishop to capture my knight, so of course that would not be so good. So I've, with very simple calculation, I have managed to find that this move that I wanted to play is unfortunately bad because of my opponent's response. So that's a very basic example, but the more moves you can go in depth, the bigger your understanding of what's going on and the more accurate your moves will be. So that is calculation, but let's now talk about the secret that I'm here to share. So many chess players just calculate random moves or something that kind of feels good, looks good, but the real secret is to take a look at the most forcing moves in the position first. What does that mean? Well, most forcing means that it gives your opponent the least amount of replies. So for example, checks are usually the most forcing type of move because according to the rules of chess, they have to react. They can't just play, some other move that they want. So we have two possible checks in this position, and many players think that all checks are equally forcing. But as I just said, notice, giving your opponent the least amount of options, that's very critical. So against knight f3, your opponent has two legal moves. G takes f3 and king h1. Okay, but knight e2 is actually more forcing because it only allows your opponent one legal move. So what does that mean? We're supposed to take a look at knight e2 first before we calculate knight f3. So calculating knight e2 first is a good sort of time management tip, simply because it's more likely going to work and there is less to calculate. If you were intending to play this move, you would have to calculate what happens after this and what happens after this. But if you calculate knight e2 first, then you only have one variation, making it more likely to work and also easier to calculate. So that is the trick. So remember the so-called tactical checklist. First, we take a look at all the checks in the order of most forcing, then we take a look at all the captures in the order of most forcing, and then we take a look at all the threats or attacks. So here we have only two checks, so we're going to take a look at those. First knight e2, then knight f3, as we said before. Then if none of those end up working for us or we don't like what happens next, then we're going to take a look at all the captures that we have available. So we can capture this pawn, we can capture this pawn, then we're going to calculate those. If none of those work, then we're going to calculate all the attacks or threats. So where we threaten to do something. So for example, a threat would be pawn to b5, threatening the knight. Maybe that's a really good move. So that is the order in which we calculate. Simple reason being, you have to take a look at the most forcing first. Also, it's called a tactical checklist because we use it to notice tactics. So doing this on every single move would be way too time consuming. So that's why we only do this when sort of our intuition tells us, hey, maybe there's a tactic, right? Or when we're doing puzzles, because then we know there's a tactic. So that is when you should apply it, not on every move. So let's try and use what we learned to solve this puzzle position. So first we take a look at knight e2 because it's the most forcing move. Okay, so after knight e2, we're going to place it on the board, but usually you would have to visualize it from the starting position with drawing arrows or without that. So we're going to play it out for the sake of the example. Knight e2, king h1, and now what's the most forcing move in the position? You can pause the video if you want. I'm spoiling the solution in 3, 2, 1. It's rook takes h2. So we have two checks, these two. But after rook takes h2, your opponent has one legal move to take. And against knight g3, they would have two legal moves. Go f takes g3 or king g1. Notice h takes g does not work because of the pin. So this has one legal move, which means we calculate it first and it's more likely going to work. So let's take a look. Rook takes h2. By the way, if you're doing this in a real game, your mindset shouldn't be like, oh, obviously this is a great sacrifice. No, your mindset is going to be like, oh, there's no way this works, but it doesn't cost me anything to take a look, So sometimes you might surprise yourself and find miraculous tactics, but you have to know that it comes from the mindset of, let's just take a look, doesn't hurt. So king takes h2, and now what's the most forcing move in the position? Well, we only have one check, so we narrow it down to rook h8. And now we can notice that this is actually about to be checkmate. It's not yet, because the bishops can sort of intervene, and then we would just take them, but ultimately it's going to be the Anastasia's mate. Let's see one more example. So this is a new puzzle position. We're going to follow the exact same way of thinking. So the most forcing moves are the ones that we look for. So first we look at checks. What checks do we have? We have h5 and we have rook takes g7. Which of those is most forcing? So rook takes g7 allows your opponent one legal move to take, and h5 allows your opponent one legal move to take. So we have a situation where both moves are equally forcing. What do you do now? Well, you can use the scientific method of flipping a coin. No, I'm kidding. You could just do it randomly, honestly. So when they're equally forcing, whatever you like. You're going to take a look at both anyway. So let's say rook takes g7. And then it's obvious that after king takes g7, we don't have any more checks. So we can just end it here and say, oh, okay, that doesn't work. So let's move on to h5. So after h5, king h7, only legal move. And now, again, we do the same thing. So what are the checks and what are the most forcing checks? So these two are the checks in the position. Which of those is more forcing? Let's take a look. Rook to h7, there's two legal moves. Knight f6, there's one legal move. Okay, so knight f6 is more forcing. Let's take a look. After knight f6, king h8, only legal move. And now the only check is rook b8. And oh, there's a checkmate. I mean, there's a checkmate. So that was all you need to know about the secret in calculation. So keep it as forcing as possible to allow your opponent the least amount of legal moves. It means it's more likely going to work and it's easier to calculate. So try and practice this in real games, try and practice this in puzzles first, and I wish you the best of luck. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you very soon. Take it easy.